Marcus Reynolds had always been a patient man, a quality honed through decades of navigating complex corporate negotiations as a mid-level environmental consultant. At 45, he'd seen his fair share of bureaucratic nonsense, but nothing quite prepared him for the suburban battlefield of homeowners associations. The property had been his dream for years, a 10-acre plot with a pristine 5-acre lake, carefully selected after a grueling decade of saving and strategic investments. It wasn't just a home. It was a sanctuary he meticulously planned since his days of living in cramped city apartments. Every detail had been carefully considered: the native landscaping that supported local wildlife, the carefully preserved wetland ecosystem, the subtle balance between human habitation and natural preservation. His journey to this point wasn't easy. A child of middle-class parents, his father a high school science teacher, his mother a part-time librarian, Marcus had learned the value of hard work and patience early on. He put himself through college, working night shifts and weekend jobs, eventually securing a position with an environmental consulting firm that allowed him to merge his passion for nature with his professional skills. The lake was more than just a body of water. It was a complex ecosystem that Marcus had studied and nurtured. He'd worked with local wildlife experts to understand its delicate balance, carefully managing the shoreline to support native species. Herons would wade in its shallows, fish populations were monitored, and the surrounding vegetation was a carefully maintained buffer that prevented erosion and supported local wildlife. Neighbors had always been a source of mild irritation for Marcus. The suburban development had grown rapidly around his property, with cookie-cutter houses sprouting like weeds, each more identical than the last. The Homeowners Association, led by the increasingly aggressive Karen Thompson, seemed more interested in enforcing arbitrary aesthetic rules than understanding the natural beauty of the area. His routine was simple yet fulfilling. Weekday mornings began with a cup of carefully brewed pour-over coffee on his deck, watching the mist rise from the lake. Weekends were spent monitoring the property, doing maintenance, and occasionally hosting small groups of wildlife researchers or conservation students who were interested in studying the unique ecosystem he cultivated. Little did Marcus know that his carefully constructed world was about to be dramatically disrupted. The tranquility he fought so hard to maintain was on the brink of a spectacular confrontation, one that would involve an unexpected alliance with the lake's most territorial residents. The day Karen Thompson discovered Marcus's lake was a perfect storm of suburban entitlement and bureaucratic overreach. It began on a crisp Saturday morning in late September, when the HOA was conducting its annual neighborhood inspection, a ritual that had become increasingly invasive over the past few years. Karen arrived in her pristine white Lexus SUV, clipboard in hand, accompanied by 2 other HOA board members: Roger Simmons, a retired accountant with a penchant for measuring lawn heights, and Linda Way, a real estate agent who saw every property as a potential listing. They moved through the neighborhood with military precision, measuring fence heights, checking for unauthorized garden decorations, and leaving warning notices for the slightest infractions. Marcus' property had always been a point of contention. Its boundaries were clearly marked, but Karen had long suspected there was something more to be gained from the expansive land. Rumors had circulated about the potential value of the property's unique ecosystem and the possibility of developing the land for community use. As they approached the property line, Karen's eyes lit up. The lake stretched before them, a pristine body of water that looked like something out of a nature documentary. Cattails lined the shores, native grasses swayed in the breeze, and a small dock extended slightly into the water. It was obvious this was no ordinary suburban pond. This, Karen declared to her companions, her voice rising with excitement, is a community resource waiting to be utilized. Roger looked skeptical. Marcus owns this land outright. It's clearly marked on the property deed. But Karen was not one to be deterred by legal niceties. She began taking photos with her smartphone, already mentally drafting the community event proposal. In her mind, this lake was being wasted on a single individual when it could bring joy to dozens of neighborhood families. The invasion didn't stop the photographs. Without any semblance of permission, Karen began walking the shoreline, pointing out potential areas for a party setup. She envisioned a massive community event, swimming, barbecues, perhaps even a small stage for local musicians. Her imagination ran wild with the possibilities of transforming Marcus's private sanctuary into a neighborhood gathering spot. What Karen didn't realize was the intricate ecosystem she was casually trampling through. Each step disturbed delicate habitats. A family of muskrats scurried away from her loud footsteps. Dragonflies scattered from their perches on cattails. The lake, which Marcus had carefully maintained as a haven for local wildlife, was being treated like an empty lot ready for development. By the time they left, Karen had already begun making calls. The HOA office became a flurry of activity. Permits were being discussed, catering companies contacted, and a massive community pool party was being planned, all without a single conversation with Marcus. Text messages began to circulate in the neighborhood group chat. "Did you hear about the lake party? Can you believe Marcus is finally sharing his property? The excitement built, fueled by Karen's manipulative narrative that suggested Marcus had agreed to this community event. What Karen didn't know was that Marcus had been watching the entire time through his high-powered binoculars, a gift from his wildlife researcher friends. He had documented every unauthorized step, every photograph taken without permission. His patience was wearing thin, and he knew that the coming confrontation would be unlike anything that HOA had ever experienced before. The invasion of his private sanctuary was complete. The stage was set for a conflict that would become the stuff of neighborhood legend. The legal battle began in earnest the following week. Marcus's first approach was methodical and professional, exactly how he handled complex environmental impact assessments in his consulting work. He compiled a comprehensive dossier that would make even the most aggressive HOA board think twice. His documentation was extensive. Property surveys dating back to the original land purchase, meticulously preserved property tax records, and a series of detailed maps clearly demarcating his private property lines. He even had environmental conservation agreements that protected the lake's ecosystem, signed and notarized by local wildlife preservation authorities. Marcus scheduled a formal meeting with the HOA board, requesting it be held at the local community center rather than allowing Karen to control the narrative. He arrived precisely at 7:00 p.m., dressed in a crisp navy blazer with a leather portfolio that contained copies of every relevant document. The meeting room was a microcosm of suburban power dynamics. Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by Roger and Linda, with 3 other board members filling out the ranks. Her confidence was palpable. She clearly believed she had the community's support. This lake, Karen began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, is a community resource that cannot be selfishly hoarded by a single individual. Marcus remained calm, a skill honed through years of negotiating with difficult clients and stubborn bureaucrats. He methodically presented his documentation, highlighting each legal protection of his property. He explained the ecological importance of the lake, presenting research from local environmental groups that detailed the unique ecosystem he had been preserving. But Karen was relentless. She produced a series of increasingly bizarre arguments. First, she claimed that the lake's water somehow originated from community groundwater, therefore making it a shared resource. When Marcus countered with geological survey reports, she shifted tactics. The community needs recreational spaces, she argued. Your private lake could solve our park shortage. The other board members began to look uncomfortable. Roger, the retired accountant, seemed particularly troubled. He quietly reviewed the documents, his initial bravado diminishing with each page. Outside the meeting, a more insidious campaign was brewing. Karen began mobilizing neighborhood support through a carefully crafted narrative. Social media posts appeared, painting Marcus as an antisocial neighbor who was refusing to share a valuable community resource. Neighborhood group chats buzzed with speculation and manufactured outrage. Text messages flew. Who does he think he is? Why should one person have a private lake? The digital mob mentality began to take shape, fueled by Karen's manipulative messaging. Marcus discovered these online conversations through a network of sympathetic neighbors who understood the importance of property rights. Each misrepresentation was carefully documented, adding to his growing file of evidence against the HOA's harassment. The portable toilets arrived first. 5 blue units unceremoniously dropped on the edge of his property. The catering trucks were next, with massive trailers marked with Lakeside Community Celebration banners. Each delivery was a calculated provocation, designed to test Marcus's resolve. But Marcus was playing a longer game. He contacted local environmental protection agencies, wildlife conservation groups, and began preparing legal documentation. He knew that Karen's aggressive tactics would eventually overreach, and when she did, he would be ready. What Karen didn't realize was that Marcus wasn't just preparing a defense. He was setting the stage for a response that would become legendary in suburban conflict resolution, a response that would involve the most unexpected of allies. The Geese didn't arrive by chance. In the weeks leading up to the planned invasion of his lake, Marcus had noticed subtle changes in the local wildlife patterns. His background in environmental consulting gave him a keen eye for ecological shifts, and something extraordinary was developing. Canadian geese were not uncommon in the area, but this gathering was different. What began as a few curious birds soon became a systematic congregation that seemed almost intentional. Marcus started documenting their behavior, setting up wildlife cameras around the lake's perimeter and keeping a detailed journal of their movements. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a wildlife biologist he worked with on previous research projects, found the situation fascinating. When Marcus shared his observations, she drove out to the property to investigate. Her expertise in animal behavior provided some intriguing insights. "It's remarkable," she told Marcus, studying the footage on his computer. "These geese are displaying an unprecedented level of territorial behavior. Look at how they're positioning themselves. It's almost like they're planning something." The geese seemed to be conducting a reconnaissance of sorts. They would arrive in small groups, systematically exploring every inch of the lake's shoreline. Their movements were calculated and deliberate. They left markers, droppings strategically placed, feathers positioned like subtle boundary signs. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like random bird activity. To Marcus and Alina, it was something more. Alina's professional theory was fascinating. Some species develop complex social structures, she explained. These geese might be responding to a perceived threat to their habitat. Your consistent conservation efforts have created an environment they view as home. Marcus recalled the upcoming HOA event. The planned party would disrupt everything. The carefully maintained ecosystem, the delicate balance of wildlife he's spent years protecting. Perhaps the geese sensed this impending invasion. Local wildlife experts Marcus consulted were equally perplexed. Migration patterns, territorial behaviors, population dynamics, nothing quite explained the growing goose army. Some suggested it could be a response to environmental changes, others proposed it might be a unique social adaptation. What made the situation more intriguing was the geese's apparent intelligence. They seemed to be studying the lake's human visitors. When construction workers arrived to set up party equipment, the geese would watch, not scattering, but observing. Their behavior was calculated, almost strategic. Marcus began to suspect something was brewing. The geese weren't just gathering, they were preparing. He installed additional wildlife cameras, upgraded his monitoring equipment, and started a detailed log. Each day brought more unusual observations. The geese were communicating in ways that seemed beyond typical animal behavior. They would take turns keeping watch, coordinate their movements with a precision that seemed almost military. Local bird watchers began to take notice. Reports started circulating in wildlife forums about the unusual goose congregation. Some thought it was a unique migration pattern, others suspected some unknown environmental trigger. What nobody realized was that these geese were about to become the most unexpected defenders of Marcus's private sanctuary. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become suburban legend, a battle between human entitlement and nature's most determined defenders. Marcus watched and waited, a slight smile forming. Sometimes the best defense comes from the most unexpected allies. The weight of the impending confrontation pressed heavily on Marcus's conscience. He had never been one to create public spectacles or engage in neighborhood drama. His entire professional life had been built on measured responses, scientific precision, and diplomatic problem-solving. Nights became a battlefield of internal conflict. He would sit on his deck, watching the lake under the moonlight, wrestling with the ethical implications of his potential actions. His background in environmental consulting had taught him the importance of careful, calculated responses. Yet the repeated violations by the HOA challenged everything he believed about community and respect. His mind wandered to his parents, who had always emphasized the importance of being a good neighbor. His father, a high school science teacher, would often say, "Conflict resolution is an art of understanding, not confrontation." His mother, equally wise, would remind him that community was built on mutual respect. But this was different. Karen and the HOA weren't seeking understanding. They were demanding control. Each potential response played out in his mind like a complex chess game. Legal action could drag on for months, potentially costing tens of thousands of dollars. Public confrontation risked painting him as the neighborhood outcast. Capitulation would mean losing the sanctuary he had worked decades to create. The lake itself seemed to whisper advice. Marcus had spent years understanding its ecosystem, its delicate balance. The wildlife that called it home, the muskrats, the dragonflies, the various bird species, depended on this carefully maintained habitat. Karen's proposed party would destroy months, if not years, of ecological work. He thought about the research projects he'd supported, countless hours spent helping graduate students study local ecosystems, providing a pristine environment for scientific observation. The lake was more than just a body of water. It was a living laboratory, a testament to careful conservation. Old photographs in his study told a story of persistence. Images of himself as a young environmental consultant fighting corporate developments that threatened local habitats. He had always been a quiet warrior, using knowledge and patience as his primary weapons. The geese added another layer of complexity to his moral quandary. Their unprecedented gathering seemed almost sentient. Dr. Rodriguez's observations suggested they were more than just birds. They were a community defending their territory. In a way, they mirrored his own struggle. Marcus began to document everything. Phone calls, emails, property surveys, each piece of evidence carefully cataloged. He wasn't just preparing a defense, he was creating a comprehensive narrative of the HOA's overreach. His colleagues from his consulting days would call, hearing about the situation. Some advised legal action, others suggested mediation. But Marcus knew this was more than a typical property dispute. This was about preserving a delicate ecosystem, about standing up to bureaucratic bullying. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent his entire career helping others understand the importance of environmental boundaries, of respecting natural habitats. Now he was living that principle in his most personal space. As the day of the planned invasion approached, Marcus realized he was preparing for more than just a neighborhood conflict. This was a statement, a line drawn in the sand about community, respect, and the sanctity of personal and natural boundaries. The geese continued their silent vigil around the lake, and Marcus knew deep down that nature was about to deliver a response far more eloquent than any human argument could achieve. The morning of the planned pool party dawned crisp and clear, a picture-perfect day that seemed to mock the impending chaos. At precisely 10:30 a.m., the first of the catering trucks rolled up, their gleaming sides adorned with banners proclaiming Lakeside Community Celebration. Folding tables emerged along with sound equipment, portable changing rooms, and an assortment of party supplies that suggested Karen had planned nothing short of a full-scale invasion. A convoy of SUVs and minivans followed, packed with excited neighbors sporting swimsuits, beach towels, and an unwarranted sense of entitlement. Children bounced with excitement. Parents chatted animatedly about the public lake they were about to enjoy, completely oblivious to the impending wildlife intervention. Karen arrived in her white Lexus, clipboard in hand, wearing a pristine white sun hat and an outfit that screamed HOA victory. She strode forward with the confidence of someone who believed she was about to transform a private property into a community paradise. What happened next was nothing short of a natural defense strategy that would be discussed in neighborhood circles for years to come. The geese, which had been quietly gathering for weeks, moved with a precision that defied natural animal behavior. As the first guests approached the lake's edge, the birds began their orchestrated defense. It wasn't a random attack. It was a calculated, military-like operation. The lead geese, massive birds that seemed twice the size of normal Canadian geese, formed a perfect V formation at the water's edge. They began with a warning, a synchronized honking that was more organized chorus than random noise. Guests stopped mid-step, confused by the wall of feathered sentinels. Then came the first wave. The geese charged in perfect formation, wings spread, necks extended. A feathered army of righteous indignation. Grown adults who had confidently marched toward the lake now scattered like frightened children. High-pitched screams mixed with honks and wing flaps. A catering worker attempted to set up a buffet table near the shore. 3 geese systematically dismantled it, setting aluminum trays flying and potato salad splashing. The DJ's expensive sound equipment became an impromptu goose perch, cables tangled and speakers toppled. Karen's white outfit became a canvas of goose-related evidence. Her pristine sun hat flew off, carried away by a particularly aggressive gander. Her clipboard went sailing into the lake, documents spreading like defeated surrender flags. Children who had been excited about swimming now clung to their parents, watching in a mixture of terror and fascination as the geese conducted their territorial defense. One particularly bold goose chased the HOA board members in a circular pattern, honking what could only be described as victory calls. The portable toilets, so confidently placed earlier, became goose fortifications. Birds perched atop them, creating an additional layer of defense that was both hilarious and strategically brilliant. Marcus watched from his deck, binoculars in hand, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. He had documentation cameras running, capturing every moment of the avian uprising. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had come to observe, was practically bouncing with scientific excitement. "This is unprecedented," she whispered, furiously taking notes. "These geese are displaying a level of coordinated defense I've never seen in my entire career." As the party dissolved into chaos, the geese maintained perfect formation. They weren't just defending a lake, they were making a statement about territorial rights, about the sanctity of natural habitats. Karen stood in the middle of the mayhem, covered in goose-related evidence, her dreams of a community party in absolute tatters. The aftermath of the lake incident became legendary in suburban folklore. Local news crews arrived, initially expecting a simple property dispute, only to find themselves covering what would become known as the Great Goose Defense of Willow Creek Estates. Legal proceedings became a complex dance of property rights and wildlife protection. Marcus, with his meticulously documented evidence, found himself in an unexpectedly favorable position. The HOA's repeated attempts to violate his property rights were now publicly exposed, complete with video evidence of their aggressive overreach. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's scientific documentation proved invaluable. Her research on the geese's behavior became the subject of a fascinating academic paper, Territorial Defense Strategies in Urban Wildlife Populations. Local university's ecology department became fascinated by the unprecedented display of coordinated animal behavior. The HOA board found themselves in an increasingly precarious position. Multiple board members resigned in the weeks following the incident. Roger Simmons, the retired accountant, was the first to break ranks. During a heated board meeting, he produced copies of the property documents Marcus had originally presented, revealing the complete illegality of their proposed actions. Local media painted Marcus as an unexpected hero. Interviews revealed his years of environmental conservation work, his dedication to preserving local ecosystems. The narrative shifted from a potential neighborhood villain to a principled conservationist who had stood up to bureaucratic overreach. Karen Thompson's reputation suffered the most significant blow. Her professional real estate career began to crumble as word spread about her aggressive tactics. Potential clients became wary, sensing the potential for similar confrontational behavior in property dealings. The lake itself became something of a local landmark. Marcus, true to his principles, continued his conservation efforts. He began offering limited educational tours for local schools and wildlife groups, turning the property into a living classroom about ecosystem preservation. Ironically, the geese became local celebrities. Children would point and laugh, recounting the legendary day when the birds defended their territory. Local wildlife photographers sought to capture images of the now famous flock. The HOA underwent a complete restructuring. New bylaws were implemented with strict guidelines about property rights and community interactions. The organization that once prided itself on micromanagement now understood the importance of respectful boundaries. Marcus found an unexpected peace in the resolution. His sanctuary remained intact, his principles vindicated. The lake continued to thrive, a testament to years of careful conservation and respect for natural habitats. During a follow-up interview with a local newspaper, Marcus reflected on the entire experience. Sometimes, he said with a hint of a smile, the best defense comes from understanding the delicate balance of nature. The geese didn't just protect a lake, they reminded us of the importance of respecting boundaries. Dr. Rodriguez would later joke that the incident was proof that nature has its own way of maintaining justice. The geese had become a symbol of resistance against bureaucratic intrusion, a feathered reminder that not everything can be controlled or commodified. As for the lake, it remained a pristine sanctuary. The geese continued their vigilant watch, a living barrier between Marcus's carefully maintained ecosystem and encroaching suburban world.